Hello and welcome to part 6 of Agnès Forever. I'd like to start this off with an apology for the previous 3 parts of this series in which for some reason I had the videos framed like this. Like I was so close to the goddamn camera. I don't know why that happened. But anyway, with that aside out of the way, we're now moving on to program 2 of the 15 program box set, the complete films of Agnès Varda, presented by the Criterion Collection, and this is disc 2, program 2, entitled Early Varda. So it's pretty self-explanatory. It features a selection of her early films, in fact her 3 very first films, which would be, and I haven't learned how to even come close to pronouncing one of them yet. So let me just think about that for a second. How would I even approach that? I'm not sure, but it features her first feature film from 1954. At least that's when she made it. It took a while for it to be shown, and even then it just didn't get a wide release and wasn't really seen properly by a wide audience until like the 90s, I think, when home video picked it up. But anyway, so the first film that she made from 1954, La Pointe Courte, and then 2 short films that she did in 1957 and 1958, Au Saison, Au Chateau, and I think it's Du Côte de la Côte or something like that. I think the English title is Coasting Along the Coast. So I'll try and brush up on that when I do the video on that movie. Anyway, so I'll quickly show you the program page, as it were, to give you a little bit of a visual cue for what we're going to be talking about over the next 3 videos. Early Varda. So yeah, it's a nice package of 3 films. One that I'd already seen before, which is La Pointe Courte, which I began this whole Agnès Forever journey with a couple of years ago when I watched that from the Artificial Eye box set over here. Which actually, I was interested to go back to this box set and see if there were any extras for La Pointe Courte, and there isn't. The only extra on this, the disc for La Pointe Courte on this box set is the short film Coasting Along the Coast, which is presented in standard definition. And I think I started watching that and I just couldn't get into it for some reason. I think it was like the ropey standard definition quality of it that really threw me off for whatever reason. But I've now watched it. I've watched all... Well, no, okay, so I didn't revisit La Pointe Courte for this series as of yet. And I didn't feel like I was going to rewatch Varda by Agnès in Program 1 either, but I felt compelled to. And I kind of do here, but I think that what would be really neat would be to end this whole series with me watching her first film again. And if you have seen that first video in which I reviewed or talked about briefly La Pointe Courte for the first time, I had problems with it. It felt uneven to me. And in the extras on this release, Agnès says it's a very uneven film, and that was kind of the point of it. And she was really striving to do something unique and something that hadn't been done before. And I would say that perhaps it had been done before, but regardless, she was trying to innovate and she was trying to do something that was not normally seen in a movie. And she certainly excelled at that, I think, with the first film that she made. And many point to that film, La Pointe Courte, as the kind of ground zero for the French New Wave. You know, it had kind of the hallmarks of that style that wouldn't really come into the forefront until male directors started making those films 4 or 5 years later in France. Anyway, so I didn't revisit La Pointe Courte, but watching all the extras on the film, which I'll be talking about in this video, really made me appreciate it even more. Like, some of the things that I learnt made a lot of sense and gave me a new appreciation for what she was doing with that film. Because there were so many things that I really loved about the film, it just didn't work as a complete piece for me. But now that I know where she was coming from, and just seeing clips from the film again and seeing people talk about it was really, really cool. So let's talk about the extras presented on this first disc. I'm going to refer to the guide to the supplements in the book, so I don't forget anything. So first of all, we have introductions to Au Saison, Au Chateau, and Du Côte de la Côte. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't know. Recorded by Varda in 2007, and there is like an asterisk next to this. So yes, these are supplements that were made under the creative direction of Agnès and her team at Cine Tamaris. So these introductions were made by her and her production company in 2007. They're very brief introductions to the two short films, and they're fantastic. I actually watched them multiple times because she packs in so much in like 2 minutes about, how the films came about, ideas that she had, things that she was thinking about as she was making them, and how that informed the process of how those films turned out. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we talk about those two short films, because the two introductions, I should say, are very much tied obviously to the films themselves, and so I'll talk about them a little bit more when I get to those two films in the next two videos. Then we have a conversation between Agnès and actor and filmmaker Mathieu Amalric from 2012 on the challenges of producing first features. This was also produced by Cine Tamaris. So Mathieu Amalric, I've seen him in films, and you've probably seen him in films too. He occasionally pops up in America. I think he was in Quantum of Solace. He popped up in Wes Anderson's The Grand Budapest Hotel in recent years, but he's also a director as well as an actor, instantly recognizable to me. And this was a wonderful featurette, which I don't know. I saw the kind of the synopsis. Agnès speaks to Mathieu Amalric, and I didn't know who he was until I saw him, and so I just imagined a very dry sit-down conversation. But this takes place in Agnès's courtyard, her garden of her house, and she has kind of made it look the way that it did in the 1950s. And she's like, I've made my yard to look like it was in 1954 when I started writing my very first film, La Pointe Courte. She sits down and she talks to us a little bit about the film. There's a clip of it playing overhead, and you see her pouring through her original notes and everything, talking about how she would write the film, the ideas that she had and all that kind of thing. And then suddenly in comes Mathieu, and it's a weird kind of awkward conversation at first. Like she's kind of being very complimentary and nice, and he's just kind of like looking at her with like wide eyes a little bit. And at first I thought he was just it was one of those things where you just get two people together and they're not vibing, they're not really clicking together. And he seemed very almost standoffish, and I thought, what's this guy's problem? And so she said, I brought you here to talk about first films because I've seen your first film and I liked it quite a bit, and we're talking about my first film, La Pointe Courte. Have you seen it? And he's kind of like, yeah, of course I have. Like his eyes just kind of bulge at even the question. And suddenly you realize that the reason it maybe seems a bit off or awkward is probably because he is such a big admirer of Agnès and her film, La Pointe Courte. And then they start talking about it, and it's great. It's really great. And the energy is still weird throughout the rest of it, which is really interesting to me. They're sat at a table in the courtyard. She's bringing out pictures from the film, and they're talking about it and talking about his first film, all that kind of stuff. She said, do you remember the very first day you shot your very first film? He's like, of course. And she's like, were you nervous? And he's like, there was no time to be nervous. Got to get it done, And Lily, my cat, is making off-camera appearance by headbutting the door open and almost knocking the lights down, which I suspect, again, anything to do with cats, Agnès would probably approve of herself. So yeah, she's kind of just, she's going to go under the sofa and maybe not interrupt too much. Anyway, so where was I with that conversation between Agnès and Mathieu? Okay, so they're talking about making first films and things like that. And she's kind of like sat at the table, but then she'll get up and she'll like pace around, and she's kind of like walking around him, like, and it's just a weird, like, the energy was kind of strange and different, but I liked it. I really did like it. And there's a brilliant moment towards the end when she's speaking to him and she's saying, what inspired you to make your first film? Basically, she said, did you have a love of cinema? Was that why you made your first film? Or were you a big movie lover? And he kind of pauses, he doesn't really answer. And then she says, or did you make it for kind of personal reasons, to express something personal? And he goes, I don't know. And immediately, like just at the drop of a hat, she's like, me neither. I'm glad we're in agreement. Which is just perfect, Agnès humor, but also there's truth to the humor as well. In that she goes on to say in another special feature on this disc that she wasn't a big fan of movies. She didn't go to the cinema really that much, and so she wasn't this cinephile who kind of worshipped at the altar of movies when she made her first film. And she doesn't know why she made her first film. It was just like she just felt like doing it, And so it was a really good conversation. I really enjoyed the unique energy that it provided us with. After that, we have an interview with Agnès on La Pointe Courte conducted in 2007. I believe this was for the Criterion DVD of La Pointe Courte, and this is a really good, meaty extra. It's only 16 minutes long. And, you know, I look at this box set and I think, man, it's such a shame that Agnès never did like audio commentaries or anything. But you look at a 16-minute interview like this and you kind of think she summed it all up. Like, I just talked about how the 2-minute introductions packed in so much. This 16-minute interview, there's so much material and so many kind of points of reference that she presents. I like the way that it was shot on a very superficial level. It's in her home office, in her house, and the behind her is the street, and so you're just seeing people walk past on their phone, kind of looking through the window like, oh, they're filming something in here, you know. And that was actually kind of distracting at certain points where I had to rewind it because obviously I don't speak French, so I couldn't listen and look at the same time, so I had to kind of go back and catch the subtitles that I missed. But I kept kind of people watching outside of Agnès' window. But she talks about everything about, you know, the La Pointe Courte and starting the film, writing the film, how she secured funding for it and how it was going to cost 10 million francs and that she had inherited some money. Her mother sold something very lucrative in order to loan her money to make the film as well. And she wrote the film and had all of these ideas. It was a very small crew on her first movie. They didn't shoot with sound. And this is something I didn't know. Not that I'm an expert or anything, but obviously you can tell when you watch the film that it's kind of post-synced and that they did all the audio later. But because a majority of the movie, as far as like all the other characters apart from the two main characters, are all these like fishermen and kind of locals who lived at La Pointe Courte. So it was kind of documentary-esque in that they were real people, non-professional actors. So when they went back to Paris to do the sound, they couldn't get the real people to do the voices. So they got people who had similar accents and dialects to dub the all of those characters. And the fishermen were really not happy when they saw the film and realized that, you know, it wasn't their voices coming out. And so that was kind of unfortunate. The two lead actors, who were kind of, you know, established actors, or at least, you know, working actors at the time. They weren't unknowns or anything. And they did this film for free. In fact, the whole crew did the film for free, which is kind of staggering. And Agnès is so appreciative of that. But in another feature, you also find out that everyone who was involved in the making of the film was basically promised a cut of the profits. And there's a 1964 interview on this disc. And Agnès says that up until this point, we've earned back 7 million of the 10 million it cost to make. So it hasn't been a very profitable film, but people have been getting paid every time profits have come through. And I wonder, you know, as years went on and on, if she ever reached that 10 million franc threshold, although by then it probably, the inflation is probably tricky to work out. But like a real, just, you know, proper guerrilla style filmmaker. I mean, obviously money needed to be spent and for the camera and all that kind of stuff, but shoot with natural lights a lot of the time, and, you know, non-professional actors, and just making this film without paying the actors, which just seemed crazy to me. But, you know, it was just a real group effort. So she talks about that, and she talks about editing the film, which is a really good story. The film was edited by Alain Resnais, who is a very notable filmmaker in his own right. He hadn't quite... I really have no frame of reference for him. I know some of the films that he has done, like Marienbad and Hiroshima, but I haven't seen them. I don't know much about him, but I know that he is a notable director. But at this point, he kind of wasn't. But I guess maybe he started in editing, something like that. I'm just making this up as I go along. I'm assuming because I don't know anything about him, but I know enough to go, oh, he edited the film. That's kind of interesting. So she brought the film to him and showed him the rushes, the dailies, and asked him if he would consider editing the film. And he's like, well, I don't know. I don't think so. And she was really upset at this. She's like, who am I going to get to edit this film? And he said, well, you have like 35,000 feet of film or whatever it was. If you can number all the rushes, like, you know, kind of get them all in order, then maybe I'll think about it. So she locked herself away for 10 days straight and numbered all the footage, and then came back to him. And he's like, you numbered all that footage in 10 days? And she's like, yes. He's like, fine, I'll do it. You know, it was like, fair enough, fair play. You know, I respect that. Let's get the film done. And he actually had minimal kind of creative say in the editing of the film, because he felt that the film was so unique that he didn't want to mess with the way that she'd made it. You know, he felt like, you know, I don't want to be flashy with the editing or anything, or try to reorder things or whatever. I feel like it's such a unique film, I need to present it in the way that you've made it, kind of thing, which is really cool, I thought. So the film premiered a private screening, I think, at the Cannes Film Festival in 1955, where it got huge positive reviews and everything, but it just didn't translate to a general audience, and so it never found that audience, unfortunately. So it was a weird thing where it was kind of heralded as this kind of great, fresh, exciting work, but it didn't really lead anywhere at the time for Agnès, unfortunately. So anyway, that kind of interview that she gave was fantastic. Really, really enjoyed it. I think there's one or two more things. Let me open the book back up. Yeah, so we have, okay, I'll go with this one. There's an appreciation of La Pointe Courte by author Jhumpa Lahiri from 2017. Not sure if I pronounced that correctly, unfortunately. This is from the Criterion channel, which, yeah, okay, so that would have been, I'm not sure actually if that's, yeah, okay, so there was Filmstruck a couple of years ago, which also housed the Criterion channel. Then Filmstruck went down, and I think the Criterion channel relaunched as its own separate entity. So, but anyway, it was produced for Filmstruck / Criterion channel. I read in one of the reviews of this box set that this kind of 4-minute piece was like didn't really deserve to be on the disc because it's for a streaming service and because it's meant to be digested very quickly. But I thought it was a nice little piece where this author, she talks about how she views La Pointe Courte as more of a poem than a film, and just really really bigs up the cinematic language that is used by Agnès in the film. And seeing the footage from the movie as she's talking about it was really, I don't know, it got me amped up about watching it again, actually. So it's a nice little 4-minute piece, and they produced it. Why not? I really think those things may not be hugely valuable, but kind of contemporary appreciations, I think, are important. And if you've got the space, throw it on there, I say. Finally, we have an excerpt from a 1964 episode of the TV show Cinéastes de Notre Temps. Definitely didn't pronounce that correctly, which is an episode talking about the French New Wave. I'm assuming it's kind of a TV show about movie makers. So this is like I think about a 9-minute interview with Agnès from 1964. Now, the quality snob in me would have loved for this to be like restored footage because it looks like it was shot on film. And an interesting note, which is really super specific and technical, but you have the kind of grainy film footage of Agnès on this 60s TV show in France, and then there are clips from the films that she's talking about. And the clips from the films don't look like they came from a 1960s TV show in France. They look like they've come from the early era of DVD, because there's like the frame rate is a little bit off. It's also almost like the motion smoothing, and it's standard definition. And so I think that this was probably released on a previous DVD and it's just been ported over from that standard definition source. And I personally would have loved for Criterion to just kind of, again, insert clips from the high definition sources they have, which is kind of fiddling around with it, but I feel like it's already been fiddled around because the quality of the movies, even though it looks bad from a 2020 standpoint, looks pretty incredible from a 1964 French television standpoint. So I'm certain that those clips have been added somewhere along the way, probably in the era of DVD. Anyway, the interview itself is really, really good, actually, where Agnès is talking about her career in film up until that point, which was at that point she'd been making films for a decade. Really interesting point is that I have heard that the 2 short films on this program, De Côte de la Côte and Au Cézanne au Château, which I'll be talking about in the next 2 videos, I've heard that Agnès wasn't really that excited about making those films because they were commissioned by the Tourist Board of France, so they're kind of tourist movies in a way. But that she's kind of, she's happy with how they turned out, even if at the time it wasn't something she was particularly, creatively excited about doing. And in this 1964 interview, she says that when she was approached to make the first one, Au Cézanne au Château, she said that, it was shameful that, that they had approached her for this, but her friends convinced her to do it. And so she went out and did it and kind of put her own spin on it and stuff like that. But that's interesting to me, considering how much worth I think are in those 2 films, that she initially started out thinking it was shameful that she was even approached to make them. That's really interesting to me. But she talks about also that La Pointe Courte and how she talks about the making of it and stuff, similar stories to the 2007 interview for the Criterion DVD. But she also mentions that in 1960, I think it was, it was in 1960, maybe 1958. She says that, anyway, at some point when she was a few years older, after making La Pointe Courte, there was an article about her in a French magazine, and it was when the French New Wave was beginning to really pick up steam, and she was labeled on this magazine as the ancestor of the New Wave, and she thought, wow, an ancestor at age 30 already. So, it was interesting to me because I'm really super familiar with her as a really old woman. So seeing interviews of her when she was really young, especially like at 30. Oh no, I guess in this she would have been more like 36, I think. So that was like, I don't know, it was interesting to see, just almost from a purely, is it psychological? I don't know, just from a purely what kind of perspective am I thinking about here? Just looking at the way that she talks, I guess, and the expressions on her face, and how they differ or are similar to the way that she looks and speaks when she's an older woman in the films I've seen her in the most. That was just intriguing to me from just a general human standpoint, I guess we'll say. But it was a really great addition to the package to get her thoughts on this film from like a 50-year period, from like 1964 all the way up to like 2012. So that was really great. And that's it. That rounds off the extras of the first the second disc of the box set. And so the next two videos I will talk about those two tourist board commissioned films, and I very much look forward to discussing them. At this point, I'm starting to post the videos of the first program, my reviews for Varda by Agnès, the 3 buttons, and just the first program in general. And they're not getting many views. I'm spending hours on the editing of them and ripping the Blu-rays and getting all the images and stuff like that. And no real comments either. And it's kind of like disheartening, but at the same time, I'm enjoying putting the effort in because this feels like such a special thing to me. And this was another great program of special features. I was actually kind of surprised. Like I said before, I felt like the first disc was going to be like front loading with the really great extras, and this one has just a really interesting selection, and it really speaks to how Agnès had her finger on the pulse of home video stuff as far as bonus features and things. I mean, she was always making these like remembrances, featurettes, looking back on the films that she made for DVDs and things, and there's actually a little note about it in the supplement guide. Let me just read this out to you. So Agnès Varda was one of the first filmmakers to approach home media releases as an artistic opportunity to expand and contextualize her work, producing many new supplements for DVD editions of her films. She affectionately called these pieces boni, a fanciful pluralization of bonus. And that's a really a key point there. One of the first filmmakers to approach home media releases as an artistic opportunity to expand and talk about her works, because it's never like just a simple to camera little monologue or interview. There's always little things that she adds in there, like the kind of discussion with Mathieu Almaric, just the way that it's set up. She made her courtyard look like it was in the 50s. She had like the movie playing behind her on kind of a digitally kind of imposed screen or whatever. So she's always playing around with these things. They're playful and fanciful. That's a good word to use to describe them, I think. Anyway, so this program gets another thumbs up from me, and I look forward to discussing the two films in the next two videos. So I hope you'll join me then. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Comment tu as ressenti le désir de ce film, le désir d'un premier film? Parce que tu aimais le cinéma, parce que quoi? Ou pour exprimer quelque chose à toi?
Je ne sais pas.
Ben moi non plus, je sais pas pourquoi j'ai fait un premier film. Bon, alors comme ça, on est déjà sur un plan.